YouTubers, there's another video from your friendly neighborhood reviewer, Evelyn. So today we're going to be reviewing episode 4 with Interview with the Vampire. For all those who want an explanation about episode 1, see the thumbnail, and I also created the playlist. Before we start, I just want to say a big thank you to all the new subscribers and to any new viewers. Really appreciate it if you can hit the subscribe button, leave a like, share, a comment, give your thoughts about the series. So episode 4 is the birth of Claudia, the child vampire. So in this reimagining of the telling of the story, we were left off at the end of episode 3 when Louis heard the cries from Claudia when the house was burning down. So in episode 4, we get a different perspective. Episode 4 opens up with Daniel Malloy talking to somebody over the phone, maybe his agent or something, about a book deal. He seems very determined to publish Louis' story. Don't know how that will work out. I get the sense that maybe Daniel will disguise this story as semi-fiction and semi-non-fiction, because how do you explain to the world about you had an interview with a vampire without sounding completely nuts? So Daniel gets a surprise from Louis' manservant, Rashid, when he tells him that Mr. Dupont, Louis, he says that he knows that you have a medical treatment scheduled next Wednesday for his Parkinson's, and that catches Daniel off guard. He tells Rashid, "You're clearly hacking me," but Rashid brushes it off. This is side character Rashid. We don't know what's his story, but I'll get onto that a little bit. And Rashid basically tells Daniel that Louis went and arranged with his doctor, okay, to receive his treatment. So Daniel's like, oh, okay, what else can I say? And then Daniel blankly tells Rashid, "Where's Louis?" And he says, well, Mr. Dupont is resting, aka it's the daytime. As we know, vampires need to rest. And Rashid tells Daniel that he's been given access to ancient artifacts that pertain to Louis. And then we find out a series of diaries have been laid out on the floor, and these diaries belong to Claudia. And then in this episode, we get the perspective of Claudia, of how she became a vampire. What does she think about this new family setup? This episode predominantly really focuses on Anne Rice's original vision about Louis and Lestat being, adoptive, gay fathers adopting a child. So once Daniel starts reading the passages, we see that Claudia got rescued by Louis, and Louis was taking her back to their house. And through Claudia being semi-conscious, unconscious, she sees that she firstly mistakenly she's in heaven and she thinks there's angels, but then she retrospectively says these angels turned out to be devils and she was in a normal room. And Louis is very desperate when he tells Lestat that to save her at any cost, and Lestat is musing. Sam really just captures the kind of pompousness of Lestat, his, divish behavior. He first tells Louis, her body's too far burnt up from here for Lestat to bite into Claudia. Louis is there very desperate, telling Lestat, "Please save her, please." And Lestat says, "You were ready to give up on our home yesterday, and now you want to add a third person into it." And he tells Louis, "What is she gonna be to us, a lapdog?" And then Louis is like, "No." And then Lestat goes and poses the idea, a daughter. And Louis doesn't really say anything, but we kind of a unspoken agreement of that's the idea where they were going at. So Lestat does, he transforms Claudia. So that's very same from the book. We have that aspect. And of course from the original film and in the book, after when Claudia gets transformed, she asks Louis that whether he has more blood to give her. And then Louis says, "Do you want some more?" So the show writers have cleverly interwoven Anne Rice's dialogue from the books to make sense with the story. And then we get time jumps on when Claudia gets introduced of being a vampire. Louis explains how he found her and the kind of the rules and the ways of being a vampire is. And we see that Lestat has fully gone into the scenario. We can see that Lestat is very desperate to keep Louis. There is love for each other, I feel, but more in Lestat's need a type of neediness. If we were to classify Lestat, borderline personality disorder, let's say, he's afraid of being abandoned or alone. Because Lestat is very old. We know that He's way older than Louis, and he's probably suffered quite a lot, and his environment of the times has changed his mentality. So we see there is some level of humanity within Lestat. When I read the other books, he became more humanized in a sense, more of an anti-hero, the Dark Prince. So both of them get together, Lestat and Louis. They're looking after Claudia, trying to understand her. They're having fun, playing games and so on. And of course, Claudia has to get used to the idea. Cakes, sweets that she liked eating before, were no longer appetizable. And of course, her getting used to living this vampiric lifestyle. And since she's much more younger, and they've aged her at 14 years old instead of her being like 8 or 9 as in the books. So she's in that in-between stages, neither girl or woman, so like between puberty, and she's frozen in puberty. So with that, means she has a more insatiable hunger for blood. She has more, she's more energetic, and this was infuriates Lestat. So there's like certain aspects within the episode that made me laugh. And of course, like any young girl may have a diary, and Lestat saying like, why she's talking to a book. And Claudia said, well, the book's my friend. And then Lestat's like, a book's a book. And of course, there's a part within the episode which I liked where both of them are in the coffins. Like, Louis with Claudia in the coffin and Lestat's in the coffin. And Claudia asks Lestat, you made Louis, you made me, but who made you? And Lestat wakes up from not wakes up, he was already awake. He opens up the coffin and he says, well, I'm not that kind when I haven't got my sleep. And that's when Louis and Lestat have this bickering in French, which is so hilarious, in which Lestat goes and starts telling Louis in French, why the hell is she asking me these questions? And Louis is like, well, she's a teenager. Every teenager questions where they come from. And Lestat swears in French and says, good night. And now there's like this little like devious attitude that's like so hilarious. I really don't know at what point their relationship is going to break, because people do refresh me at what point their relationship will break. I think Claudia plants the seed to Louis to go and murder Lestat and go off on themselves. So also within the episode, we get cut forward to present time with Daniel Malloy. He takes his time to read through the books, and even he finds a lot of the things hard to digest. We see that in later chapters, they all were still together around World War I-ish, I think. And Claudia spoke about getting the blood from the prisoners of war. It was too bitter. And Daniel gets interrupted by Rashid praying, because in Dubai it's predominantly Muslim. So we can hear Rashid praying. But the interesting fact is we see Rashid in the shade. We don't see him in the sunlight. Could he be a vampire also? We don't know. Could he be a hidden character? You let me know your theories. And Daniel has the balls to tell Rashid, does Muhammad know that your vampire is also your god? But Rashid doesn't doesn't chide into all of that. So Daniel's trying to really uncover the people that are helping Louis, their origin stories and their reasons for serving Louis. And the other part within this episode, we see the downsides of being a vampire. A couple of years have passed by, and Claudia in her mind is already aged 25-ish, but she still looks 14. So when she starts discovering her sexuality, her femininity, she wants to appear older. So there's that failed attempt on dressing up much older than what she appears to be to match her, emotional, the age of her brain, let's say. And we get that funny scene where she's going out the door and both Louis and Lestat, they're like doting her parents, but telling her to be safe while happy hunting. And Claudia gets that sense for the first time that people still see her as a child. And then she meets this other boy that's right, the taxi of the time with the horse and cart, where the guy was there having his cart to put in customers. So his name is Charlie. This is very important, the interaction between Charlie and Claudia. So when Claudia and Charlie go out on a date, we can see that Charlie has invited Claudia for an ice cream, and we see that Charlie's saying, why don't you like the ice cream? But Claudia brushes off, she's trying to make it last for a long time. And Claudia tells Charlie, this way you take everybody out for a first date. And Charlie's like, well, you're pretty young. So he tries to put that off, but Claudia tries to convince Charlie that she is, much older than she looks. So they have their first sexual encounter, but in the heat in the moment, Claudia goes and drains Charlie dry to the bone. And she desperately carries the body of Charlie back to the house, and she's pleading with Lestat, and she has, blood all over for him to save Charlie, but Lestat is like, I can't. He crassly picks up the arm of the dead body of Charlie and lets it go, and he says, well, we haven't made him half dead. He's completely dead, dry to the bone. And this is what turns Claudia crazy, because Lestat forces Claudia to watch them burn Charlie's body, and he tells Claudia, this is the consequences of your kill, so have a look. And in that moment where Claudia is in her coffin, just thinking about everything, she goes into a psychotic kind of break in which she sees everything is going in the right way, and she decides that there's more things to be done. In her mind, I guess a form of self-harm, let's say, she opens up the skylight that they have closed for the light to come through, and she ends up burning herself. And then we get the end of the episode. The other parts within the episode, we do get a flash forward again of Louis has finally awoken and sees that Daniel's reading the diaries, and then they have that conversation, and Daniel asks Louis, how come in 1973 there wasn't any of these diaries? And then Louis says, well, they were scattered around. So Daniel presses Louis more, kind of saying that he's kind of lying, and then Louis says, imagine, because he knows Daniel has daughters, so he uses that as a way of empathy. Imagine discovering the diaries of your daughter, and then imagine reading the part where you failed them massively, where they either turned bad, evil, whatever. So there's a lot of things to contemplate with this episode, because we know that Claudia will become a big instrument in the separation between Louis and Lestat, and like the repercussions of that. I know they will go to Paris. That's the promo for the next episode, and Paris, for people, I know that in my mind, the company of vampires with Armand being, the helm of the center. Will they interwove that into the story of Louis and Lestat? Because there are other vampires. There's more. There's Marius, there's Armand, there's Lestat, Louis, Tarquin. Name me others that I've forgotten about. Also not Akasha, the two sisters with the long red hair, that one of the first vampires. Of course, we remember Queen of the Damned. So there's a multitude of vampires. Not multitude, but there is vampires out there. So it'll be interesting to see more of the original characters come into play. Okay, so this is the end of the video. To all the guys to anybody who made it at the end, big thank you. Leave your comments down below. What did you think about the episode? And are you going to miss the split within the company of Claudia, Louis, and Lestat? Because the episode was sweet, but then again, you can't live in a fantasy forever. Real life is real life. So as I leave you always, bye!